Hello everyone and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia Lost can be found. This video is going to be a quick look at the DPS Simulator and custom DPS Simulator that exist for Dragalia Lost. These are a couple of the most popular community resources out there, and kudos to the teams behind both of these tools. I believe they're co-managed, but I'm not sure of that. It's just a really impressive feat that we have this type of resource available for this game, in my opinion. And you see debates in the comment section everywhere about people who treat this as gospel versus people who are highly skeptical. And honestly, I'm kind of somewhere in the middle where I think that this is an extremely valuable resource. We can glean a lot of information about this, particularly in a game like Dragalia Lost that has lots of hidden mechanics. So I think it's important that I make a video like this to kind of share this tool with you, maybe talk through some of the assumptions behind it. And although I'm not an expert on using it, I'd still like to present it since I think it's valuable that you have access to it and kind of know what you're doing when you get into it. So that's going to be the purpose of the video today, and it's no coincidence that I'm releasing this after I did my chain co-ability and co-ability guide. Got some feedback on that, and speaking of the hidden mechanics in Dragalia Lost, I'm constantly learning things about the game, so I appreciate your grace and patience as you corrected me on a couple of things that I had wrong with that. So one of them was critical rate, in fact, does suffer from diminishing returns as you add it up. Extra critical rate gives a smaller DPS increase the more of it you already have, so that's a pretty big one that led me to overestimate how good critical rate is as a whole. So I want to apologize for that. It's obviously never my intention to mislead you. Another thing that I learned recently is apparently buff time does not just apply to skills, it also applies to some abilities. So with all the hidden mechanics in the game, there's a lot going on. I know I've gotten some requests to make a hidden mechanics video at some point, but I'm still trying to figure out how to do that because there's so much that's not directly told to us, like the damage modifiers for skills, the SP costs, and so on. So I also want to give a shout out to start things off to the wiki team and the data mine teams as well who work on this game, because without them, the tool that we're going to look at today would not be possible, and a lot of the analysis and commentary that myself and other YouTubers do would not be possible either. So with that said, let's get into the DPS Sim and the custom DPS Sim. You can see I have them in my bookmarks here. We're going to start off with the regular DPS Sim, although I think that more experienced players who have used this tool for a while kind of know that the custom sim is sort of where it's at. But nevertheless, we're going to look at this because this is the one with the pretty graphics that I think a lot of people are familiar with and gravitate towards. It does look really nice. The UI on this is really sweet. It's been improved steadily since it released. Now you have lots of info here. Basically, this is like a ranking of characters by their DPS. This amount is the damage that they do every second. I believe it would be on average over the course of whatever time limit you set, so 180 seconds, 120, or 60. You can set the team DPS, which is the total personal damage of your other team members, with the idea being that this is a way to scale the team contribution for your characters. Like, if a character provides a buff to the team, well, the contribution of that to DPS is going to depend on how good the DPS of those characters was to begin with. Recently, there's been additions like actually factoring in your dragon into this now, which is pretty cool. And as you can see, next to each character, you have their kit, including, right now, their weapon, dragon, worm prince, and also the backliners. So basically the characters whose chain co-abilities and co-abilities you would want to pair with this character. I assume in a future update, it's also going to show the shared skills that are going to be desirable for the character. And you can actually click on any of this and it will give you a link out to the wiki page, which is really fantastic. It's very well integrated. So this is probably why a lot of players have a perception of Shadow as a very strong element. In simulation, it does tend to perform really well, and even if you were to just look at the damage modifiers on some of these characters toward the top, they're really, really high. I mean, Vice is a character who, you saw the mana spiral, you would have thought nothing of it. It looked completely unremarkable, if not for the fact that we have the ability to look into the back end and see that some of those skills he has have really insane damage modifiers despite looking very plain. So that's the type of insight I feel like it's safe to glean from this. When you want to extrapolate and say, you know, Gall Alex strictly better than Vice. That's probably a little bit too far. You know, there are conditions, obviously, for each of these things, and they're usually spelled out pretty explicitly here. So your capacity to actually fulfill these conditions is going to have an effect on your damage output as well. There's also some descriptions, and there's lots of like really cool filtering features. So if you want to look for particular rarities or particular elements, you can see that's for Flame, for example. The Dragon section, which is in this purple, is pretty high now that we have Gall Mars. I think that's just something that I'm glad they implemented, because it wasn't always the case that you got to see the effectiveness of Dragon transformation here. It's pretty cool that it's available now. But basically, you can sort of look for any character you want to and get a sense for what their optimal backline might be and why they vary so much. This is what makes it hard to make a guide on what to invest in broadly, and I would say I still stand by and think that you probably want a Blade first, a Wand second, maybe not a Dagger third when I think about how few characters actually use daggers here, and stuff like the hits equal strength looks better than I probably gave it credit for. It is used pretty frequently on this. So that's kind of a little overview. There's commits here. If you're interested in reading the commits, you can go to GitHub and see those. I don't think there's that much more detail on these. And there's also an about page that is updated infrequently, but tells you some of the assumptions that are happening here. So let's go ahead and click on that. This is also part of the Git, so credit to all of these people. I think this was originally a fork of BlueBlue's work, so credit to them for making this originally. So some of these assumptions are definitely outdated, but you get kind of the overall sense of what's being assumed. Like, I presume now that it has level 40 altars instead. Obviously, it doesn't necessarily have tier 2 high dragon weapons. It has Agito weapons at times, and they would be level 200, not 100. And but some of this is also still accurate. The combos here presumably have been updated, for instance, for daggers, because they no longer have a backflip. And it also tells you what's not simulated, but some of this probably is simulated now, like the dragon stuff, as well as special mechanics and how they're treated. For instance, getting 1 dragon claws in the middle of a fight. But these are the types of things that you can play around with in the custom sim. So let's go back, and now I'll share that with you, as I think that's a really, really cool tool. So I wanted to look at Pietro today, as he's a pretty simple character. I'm going to filter for water. I'm going to filter for 3 stars, and then for axes. So now I have my Pietro. You can see the backline that's been proposed for him, and a lot of his damage seems to actually come from dragons, which, now that dragons are being simulated, you see the merit of somebody like Leviathan over a Dragon Yule Jeanne d'Arc. Previously, Dragon Yule Jeanne d'Arc would have been presumed to be better because shapeshifting wasn't really accounted for, and in expectation, her critical rate, I believe, gives her like a 4% DPS improvement over Leviathan when you just look at their auras and not how good they are after you transform. So anyway, this is Pietro. One other toggle I didn't mention is there's an affliction toggle for whether affliction is happening 100% of the battle, or you can put it as none. What none really does is relegate the uptime to that adventurer most of the time. So like, Pietro doesn't cause frostbite, so he's not going to have frostbite related prints. If it were an adventurer who did cause frostbite, like let's get Lazri in here, you can click on this or hover over it and you'll see that in simulation she has 88% frostbite uptime. But since Pietro doesn't have that, he's not getting any frostbite prints when I toggled this off. So now I'm going to click on Customize, and we'll go to the Custom page. Pretty cool looking page. This one is a little bit more bare bones, but it has a lot more functionality. So you can pick an adventurer. You can pick the time you want to simulate, team DPS. These are all things that are fairly familiar to us, but the time here you can actually do, I'm not sure if it's just integer values, but even if it's just integer values, you can do things other than 180, 60 seconds, etc. You can, let's see, what else can you put on here? I haven't used this HP button, so apologize for that, but you can pick weapons, including weapons that have not been released yet that hypothetically might be released. Like, let's say they give the attack rate buff to the Agito water weapon, then you could pick that. Or if they give a strength buff, And it's not obvious reading this whether this is the strength buff that you get from Flame or it's the strength buff you get from Wind, since I think they're slightly different. Same with dragons, you can look at unreleased dragons potentially. There's not a Galamar's water dragon yet in here. And then worm prints, there's lots of selections. I think all the worm prints are in here, and usually this tool, the custom tool, gets updated before the main tool gets updated in my experience. But if I scroll here, one of the things that's pretty neat, I'm trying to see if we can find it, yeah, some worm prints that have conditional effects, like Dear Diary, which procs resilient offense when your HP gets low, they actually have the timing when you get the resilient offense, or the frequency of time when you get it. So you can actually modify things like that if you really want to. And there's also some prints that don't necessarily exist per se, but that you might want to look at in general, like a high dragon worm print. You don't necessarily need to see the specific worm prints here, but this lets you proxy for the fact that in a certain high dragon trial, especially if you're newer, you might need that high dragon worm print, which would take up a slot toward prints that could otherwise help your DPS. So the other thing that's in here now, which wasn't always the case, is that you can see that you can pick your weapon skill or a shared skill, and then you can pick your second shared skill. As long as the cap is okay, it's below 10, then you should be good. And there's also something here, this has been here for forever, but called the ACL. Basically, there's a guide here, but this is how you write out the sequence of moves, like basic attacks, skills, and so on, that your adventurer is going to use. So that's the purpose of the ACL. And you can pick specific co-abilities here. So let's say I don't want to mess with the sequence of moves that Pietro's using, but I just want to mess around with the co-abilities. Maybe, for example, I could get rid of Xander and try out a Blade and see how that works and run a test. And you can see that my damage is actually slightly worse. But there's also some advanced features here, like specific affliction uptimes that you can set. You can even set things for ranged adventurers about their missile speed, which is how fast their projectiles connect, I believe. And conditions, like whether you're maintaining a 15-hit combo. So let's go ahead and simulate some strength. Let's simulate, let's say, 30% strength buff on Pietro on average in this fight. So we simulated that, and this is with the Blade. And now let me swap to Xander and see what that looks like. All right, and you'll notice it's very, very close now. And so the higher that I raise this strength buff, the worse Xander's chain co-ability should be. So if I do this, obviously now that I'm at 40, the overall DPS is going to go up, but compared to using a Blade, it should go down. So the overall DPS went up. Now let me swap from Xander to a Blade and see what it looks like. And now a Blade is slightly better with this amount of strength buff simulated. So you can test things like this depending on the actual conditions that you expect to face within the battle, and that's kind of a good demonstration of diminishing returns as well. If you're not expecting to have any extra strength buffs in the match, well, Xander's chain co-ability looks a lot better than a regular Blade, with it being the only 13% strength that you're getting, conditional on you maintaining that hit 15. And I don't think there's a way here to toggle the uptime on hit 15, but maybe that's a future update that will come to the tool. But then as you skew toward, say, having a lot of strength buffs for the match, like let's say you have a Gala Elisan, and she's able to maintain pretty high uptime on her buffs, maybe she shared skills from a regular Ellie or vice versa. Well, when you have 40% buff, then Xander's actually not as good as a Blade. So these are the types of comparisons that you can make. Obviously, there's also consideration that maybe this dagger would have been better as Xander. So you could maybe run both Xander and a Blade, but the point is you can really use this to play around and try out different things. And as much as this number shouldn't be seen as definitive, it is still pretty cool, and it's pretty cool to test different setups. I mean, some of the stuff that I was looking at earlier was things like Galaluka gets better with different combos on him, or rather different buffs on him. he does benefit from comboing as well. So it was kind of fun to see sharing various buff skills onto him, or sharing Karina's skill, what that looked like. Seems like Karina has been a pretty big winner from Skillshare overall. But I guess that's pretty much what I want to say for this video. Hopefully this gives you enough basic information to be able to play around with this, try different things out. You want to try and inform yourself as much as possible, so reading this about page, the usage guide, which is a short read, the ACL guide, and then going to the Reddit Discord server, which is the big Discord server for Dragalia Lost. There's also a wiki channel, and there's other channels, I presume, that would help you with this type of information. I'm not privy to that, as I am a social hermit, really, so I'm not over there, unfortunately. I just am, all holed up where I am. But anyway, y'all, I just wanted to share this today. I thought it was important that I make a video like this just to let you know that this exists. It's really fun to play around with. Once again, I think that striking a balance is important here, to read the assumptions and understand them, but you can really do some fun things with the ACL when you get into it. So that is going to do it for today, everyone. I'm making this while co-op is down in Dragalia Lost, so I guess I'm going to end it here and see if hopefully the game is still alive after I exit this video. But thank you so much for watching, take care, and I'll see you next time.